All right, Geek Interview. So, what did you think of Sherlock Season 1, Episode 2, The Blind Banker? What were your general thoughts?
The initial thoughts with the opening was, well, the way I look at anything that's not been made in the last 5 years is the sort of way that the Asian culture is portrayed probably wouldn't go down that well these days. Those sort of first few minutes, there was a few quite heavy cliches and stuff there. Yeah, I couldn't remember what this episode was about before I watched it. I actually thought the second episode of this season was the second episode of another season. I always find with Sherlock, the second episodes tend to be the weaker ones. I don't know why. It just seems to be a sort of consistent thing. I don't know if it's something that deliberately force into the writing so that the final episode feels a bit more bigger, or if there's a big reveal or something like that. It was okay. It wasn't brilliant.
The last time that we recorded, and we mentioned this episode, and I was not looking forward to this episode, but for some reason, this episode kind of played very well for me. I really, really like the opening to this episode with the Chinese woman basically explaining to the tourists who are visiting London the importance of continuously making tea with old pots. I found that to be very, very interesting. My favorite scene, though, was seeing Dr. John Watson having a row at the pin machine.
It was good. I mean, they kind of built the Watson character a little bit, but not too much. I think this episode was more to highlight how the dynamic of the two was going to work after the initial sort of introduction. Because I say it's mostly about Watson rebuilding his life rather than about his past. And yeah, Watson is supposed to be the everyman, and obviously the story's told from his point of view because he writes the blog. And I don't know, I like Martin Freeman as an actor now, but not in everything. And at the time of watching this originally, I wasn't hugely impressed by him. I think that's maybe because Benedict Cumberbatch was brand new and so huge. His star was just on the rise, and Martin Freeman was already established.
What did you think about Sherlock's old college roommate that basically hires him to investigate a theft at the bank that sort of started out this whole thing?
Yeah, I did think about that quite a bit. Because I was like, how did these guys meet? It must have been like they lived together, or like Sherlock lived with someone that guy was friends with, and that guy was round at the house a lot. Because you can't imagine Sherlock being social. And I don't think they actually mentioned what he studied in university. I might be wrong about that. But I don't think that given the career that this guy's going into and the one that Sherlock's chosen, they would study the same thing. So I thought it was interesting that we got a little tad of a glimpse of Sherlock's past. But yeah, the guy was fun. It would be nice to see him pop up again. I don't think he does in the season though, or any of the seasons.
In my opinion, that guy was just a class A dickhead, from start to finish. Sherlock's way of doing things with people is very abrasive and very odd. When Sherlock finds out some clues about the case originally, he just busts into a restaurant and automatically just starts spouting out information to the guy that he knew at college, just randomly like that. Who does that?
Yeah, I think it is still to show that he is quite sharp because the scene with the guy from college, the guy sort of refers to it as, "Do you still do your little tricks?" As if it's sort of magic or sleight of hand, or it's something that he can only do under the right circumstance if he's prepared. So I think Sherlock was flexing his muscles a little bit in this episode.
What do you think of the chief inspector that replaced Lestrade? Because apparently Lestrade in this episode wasn't available. So I was curious to see what that was all about because he was in episode 1. Do you think the actor just wasn't available?
Yeah, I can't remember the actor's name, but he does pop up in a lot of British TV shows and a lot of films as well. So yeah, I forgot that Lestrade wasn't in this, and then it would have been nice to have him in it, but uh, Lestrade is one of the characters that wasn't as developed throughout the season or the episodes as I would have liked. Would have liked a bit more from his point of view or from his team's point of view, kind of thing.
What do you think about the whole plot line of John trying to make Sherlock realize that they need money to survive? John goes so far as to get a job, a doctor's office. When he's going to the interview, the woman who's giving him the interview is looking over his resume and seeing that he is severely overqualified.
Doctors make a ridiculous amount of money anyway. Plus, he'd been in the army. But yeah, I get the feeling that Watson came from money as well, not as much money as the Holmes family, but certainly I think the Watsons lived a comfortable lifestyle, or he lived a comfortable lifestyle growing up, so maybe he was used to that. And at the end of the day, they do live in London, and it is one of the most expensive cities to live in on the planet.
What did you particularly think about the scene where Sherlock basically got almost murdered to death by this Chinese gentleman almost choking the shit out of Sherlock in a flat? And the only reason that Sherlock almost died is because he refused to let John into the apartment building.
Yeah, like I said at the start, I think this episode, with the way that it portrays Chinese culture, doesn't stand up to the test of time very well, given that it was made 10 to 12 years ago, depending on how long from filming it till making it to air. Yeah, it wasn't particularly brilliant. I felt sorry, actually. I should have mentioned that the actress at the start who was pouring the teas, called Gemma Khan, she was in the first Captain Marvel film, but she's now going to be in the Eternals playing a totally different character. She's going to be quite big in the MCU going forward. Yeah, I would highly recommend, if you really want to see what she can do. I think it might be on Netflix. It is in the UK, a show called Humans, and it's a sort of slightly futuristic kind of Blade Runner thing where everyone's got a domestic robot the same way that we have like a mobile phone or an iPad or something like that, but it looks like a human, and it's all about them trying to gain intelligence. It's very low budget, but it's very well done, and I think there's only 2 or 3 seasons of it, something like that.
How did you feel about the reveal in this episode? The oldest mob syndicate in China wanted to find this really ancient old pin. So what did you think about the final showdown in this episode in particular?
It was weird. I'm sure Sherlock covered quite a lot of ground very quickly from the way his voice, or the sound of his voice, was carrying. Again, this episode was okay. It wasn't great. The villains weren't great. The showdown wasn't particularly great. But again, the next one's going to set up the kind of future dynamic of Sherlock from sort of the end of season 1 up to whenever it was, season 3 or 4, that it came to an end. So yeah, I suppose you can't be too ambitious if it's, not every middle part of a trilogy can be The Empire Strikes Back or something like that.
Wrapping up now, I didn't think this episode was that impressive, other than the little moments between John and Sherlock and those tiny little character moments. But I really wasn't impressed with this episode that much after all. So what would you grade this episode if you had to? What would you give it?
Oh, C minus.
I will give it. I'll give it a C.
You think if this episode aired today, there'd be a lot of controversy?
I don't particularly. I'm not too sure about how it would be portrayed. Like here, I'm sure that people would jump on it, but I'm not sure what the reaction would be in the UK. Do you think that the UK would have the same reaction given today's climate as they would in the US?
The UK probably not. I don't think. It would depend on what else was going on at the time, but yeah, it just struck me in the opening titles. I was like, whoa, this is really going heavy with quite a lot of stereotypes. And again, when you look at anything that's sort of older than 5 years old, you kind of have to look at it of, would this get made now? Even something like the film Superbad, which is completely amazing. There's nothing wrong with Superbad, but it would not get made today.
What are you looking forward to in the final episode of season 1? Because that's the big one.
Well, yeah, knowing what's coming, really looking forward to it. I've not watched it in, God, probably at least 5 or 6 years. So just looking forward to little hints, because I remember quite clearly how it ends, but I can't remember the beginning too well, because it does end on quite a big cliffhanger. And again, I think Sherlock was every 2 years for a season, so it's quite a long way to wait, especially for a British show.
All right, guys. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up our review of Sherlock season 1, episode 2, entitled The Blind Banker. Before we go, Geek and Review, if the good folks at home want to reach you, what would be the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. That's all the one word. Or you can search for my YouTube channel, The Geek and Review. Posting a lot of Marvel and DC stuff recently, and a lot of Star Trek content coming up, because obviously we're going to get 6 years of continuous Star Trek shows from now until it's not profitable anymore.
All right, guys. So on that positive, semi-negative note, if you want to find me, the best place to do that would be on Twitter. I'm at QuickFanatic88. But thank you so much for listening. And as always, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.